additional settings, such as the ability to go into 1080p if you're on our professional plan or above. If you're looking to have a guest join the stream, go ahead and click the Invite Guest icon here at the bottom, then copy the stream. You'll want to go ahead and set this to anybody who wants to. For this, I have my laptop set up here, and I've already gone ahead and started the stream, and I've already opened it. So here's the link. As soon as I do that, the feed in the center will switch over to what the host sees, and I'll be in the scene that I've joined here on the right hand.
Imagine a world without prejudice, bullying, or fear. Imagine a world where our individuality is respected by all our peers. Inclusion and equity are more than words or just a ploy. They are workplaces rich with diversity, creating worlds we all enjoy. Imagine a better world where we all can live free and play, where the spirit of teamwork and solidarity give hope and light the way. Good business isn't just profits or pushing for sales. Good business must strive to be just as it scales. Good business is planting a seed in a visionary trail to foster an environment where diverse abilities prevail. Let's build that new world in solidarity. Diversity rocks innovation. Let's build solutions for equality to bring hope and transformation. Let's honor co-creation, honor individuality, with a vision for togetherness beyond screens and virtual reality. All it takes is a little to change the world a lot. Money comes and goes, but legacy isn't forgotten.
Welcome to Diversity Rocks Innovation. 多様性が革新を起こすへようこそ。在日カナダ人政治学者、そしてEnjoy 多様性と革新のファウンダーと CEO スティール・ジャッキと申します。よろしくお願いいたします。My name is Jackie Steele, and welcome to Diversity Rocks Innovation for our Volume 3 edition. My name is Jackie Steele. I'm the CEO of Enjoy Diversity and Innovation, and also a longtime Canadian political scientist here working in Japan. Enjoy, for those who are not familiar, is a Japan-based global-facing company. And we work in English and French and Japanese, and we're committed to providing research, policy, and evidence-based D&I training and education for leaders and corporations on the importance of intersectional diversity. If that's a new concept for you, we'd love to share about that. Accessibility, holistic corporate policy ecosystems that empower individuals and groups, and of course, innovation. Innovation that supports efforts to bring inclusion and that fosters holistic well-being. And in fact, innovation that really supports democratic equality and that powers our people systems by design, intentionally. So the live stream today is intending to shine a spotlight on the beautiful diversity of the Enjoy D&I Thought Partner Network. Each of these individuals are making a unique contribution, and they are bringing their diversities to the fore and using their own model of inclusive leadership to change things here in Japan and also across Asia Pacific. So we call this live stream Thought Partnering Out Loud. And what that means is we're taking on this practice, this new concept and practice of thought partnering, which I learned about from a leadership coach in the United States many years back. And it stuck with me as a really important tool to guide lifelong learning and to help us build solidarity with other people who are different from us and to learn from each other. So it's a pillar of how Enjoy as a business is committed to role modeling, if you will, this horizontal, reciprocal giving of ourselves and of our talents as leaders and stakeholders working within and across Japan and the Asia Pacific. So each week I feature one of my esteemed Enjoy D&I thought partners. These individuals enrich my thinking and they help my business innovate. They help me redefine and rethink how Enjoy can be more innovative and how it can be mobilizing diversity in many interesting ways. So we just show up as two human beings, as individuals. We throw out the business cards to the extent we can. We're just two people talking out loud. There's no senpai-kohai relationships. There's mentoring and reverse mentoring in the space. We move beyond and in defiance of the various toxic socializations that we've been experiencing as we grow up over the years, be it around gender or race or sexual orientation or ability or language. And we just show up together to learn from each other and to really respect each other's diversity and each other's radical individuality. So today, if you are joining at 7 p.m. on a Monday from Vancouver, or maybe it's 10 p.m. for you in New York, maybe it's 10 a.m. for you in Bangkok, or maybe it's your lunch hour here in Japan, 12 p.m. JST, I invite all of us to become open to the gray zones of race, gender, ability, nationality, sexual orientation, professional expertise, business cards, this, that, and the other titles, affiliations, shozoku, and just embrace the gray zones of all of those markers of our identities and then enrich the conversation for our lives and for our communities. So we'll take 55 minutes and have a journey of seeking out those nuances. And we'll find the joy really in diversity as a driver of innovation. And that makes really, I think, as a political scientist, the project of democratic self-government so exciting. I know most people don't find democratic self-government exciting, but I really do. And I think it's worth pursuing in our homes, our workplaces, our communities, and also, of course, through our transnational social justice networks or through our global sustainability networks, and also in our interpersonal relationships. Today, my guest is Casey Wahl. And this is someone who I consider to be a trusted friend. Casey, you can join me on screen now. Come on board. Casey has been a trusted friend, an inspirational colleague, someone who's been amazingly generous as a mentor to me in this journey I have started upon, trying to learn how to be an entrepreneur and a CEO of a company here in Japan. And he has shared his learnings, his challenges as a business builder and a change agent himself here in Japan. And this has really genuinely helped light my way forward in so many pivotal ways and given me such a sense of safety net and support. So thank you, Casey, and welcome to Diversity Rocks Innovation.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I think I'm just an idiot that makes a lot of mistakes and happy to share those transparently. That's about it.
No way, not at all. There's so many things, just so many gems of inspiration and advice you've given me that have been really pivotal.
If you sift through all the other stuff, right?
But you do it with such grace, right? And such like learning and vulnerability and humility that I think that is so important also for leaders to be able to say, yeah, this didn't work. Yeah, this kind of didn't go how I'd hoped. But
so I think that's going to be the next 55 minutes of, yeah, that didn't work, this didn't work.
But I think there's so many things that are working really well. And so I also want us to shine a light on that because I am personally so inspired with so much of what you've been doing. And I would maybe start by inviting you to share a bit about, I know most people, because we are foreign nationals in Japan, often this conversation starts with, well, who are you? And, what are the main parts of yourself that are really key to how you define your identity as yourself, as Casey Wahl? What defines you and what is important to you in how you self-define, I guess. And I know we self-define differently when we're back in our home countries versus from when we're in our adoptive home countries of Japan. But maybe talk to me about where you fit yourself and how you would describe yourself, plural, here in 2021 today.
That's probably one of the toughest interview questions I've had. And I've been live on CNBC and CNN and, asked about China trade policy and the Shanghai Stock Exchange, which I don't know much about on live, national TV, but my identity. I think a lot of it's, with anybody just shaped by how we grew up and how we, kind of learned about the world. So I grew up in, a 900-person town in the desert of Saudi Arabia. It's kind of like a military base, but it was kind of an oil manufacturing or kind of oil refining facility in the middle of the desert. And I was there from when I was 1 to 15. Wow. I almost got deported a couple of times. Wow. I went to, so they don't have any English speaking education after high school, after middle school. So actually the company my father worked for basically paid for boarding school, so that way employees would stay. So I went to boarding school in kind of the northeast of America. So that was a big shock. I think went from the desert, by myself, and I wanted to go, and everybody kind of has to go, but I kind of wanted to go. But that was a culture shock because I'm American. It's kind of an American culture, but it's like an American culture from the 1950s or 60s in this military base in the desert. And then you go into, it was the 90s at the time when I went into high school, and I have no idea what the trends are. I think I use archaic words. My jokes are at a different pace than everybody. So, I got made fun of a lot. There were some not very nice epithets from that. Finally got the hang of things, but then I got kicked out. 3 months before
Why?
graduation. I think I left them no choice. I had
You were unruly?
I think this just goes back to the entrepreneurial thing, right? Like it must be a little bit of DNA. You know, I do think entrepreneurialism, it can be learned, but at least for me, it was just always testing the rules, right? And like, okay, what is the boundary? How far can you go? You know, and just kind of testing things. So I had like 5 or 6 on-campus suspensions and, you know, a couple of off-campus suspension. It was just like, oh, well, you know, that's
Was it
all the...
sort of innocent truancy, or were you like the engineering, you know, faculty at UBC building a car out of Lego on the roof of the engineering building for kicks? Or, you know, there's these stories that you see of different ways in which truancy plays out in different ways. Was it pushing boundaries that you were trying to explore your freedoms, or were you also trying to just build something new or bring something forward that was different?
Well, you know, we were building forts in the woods and stuff like that, what we're not supposed to do. You know, there was alcohol and stuff related, and kind of exploring those boundaries. And, you know, I can think social boundaries kind of being related, but there were quite a few pranks, you know, and some all school pranks that, you know, disrupted school for hours at a time and stuff like that. And I thought they were brilliant at the time, but, you know, I can understand kind of going back and looking at those, how they can be, you know.
Now as a parent and someone in a different stage of life, when you think back, would you, if you were an educator in those schools, how would you have welcomed those brilliant pranks?
It's interesting, like, you know, I think I've certainly got a high tolerance for it. And, you know, I think, you know, people understand people like themselves, right? You know, so I could understand somebody who's doing the pranks, you know. I don't think I'm a bad human, or there's not really trying to hurt, you know, people's
You're not
feelings.
just a Yankee.
I'm not, you know, I'm not doing the Saitama squat and you Yankee, you know, type of thing like that, riding around on the motorcycle, super loud, disrupting. But
we have that in our neighborhood from time to time, yeah.
Yeah, even then, like it was kind of, you know, setting up for entrepreneurialism. So like a lot of teachers just hated me, like absolutely hated me. Like, you know, I didn't study, but I got very good grades. You know, I was lucky in that sense. And, you know, they knew I was somewhere just waiting to catch me all the time. Others I was disappointing. And then there was just like 1 or 2 that kind of understood me, you know, and, you know, I felt understood. And, you know, I think that's when I started to realize how important understanding is. And, you know, how like one person just understanding you and kind of seeing past everything else that, you know, gets
like seeing you, being
exactly.
seen for like, you're a free spirit, and that doesn't make you a bad person.
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
Maybe you're not docile and controllable. And in schools, we kind of want our kids, right? We want our kids to be, I think the education system overly builds that in to accept compliance and obedience and docility, but then we're killing the innovation, right? We're killing the potential for thinking outside the box and the innovation in these bright minds.
Yeah, and just the humanity and the souls of them, right? You know, like I think if you're forcing a kid that has lots of energy and, you know, needs to kind of, like my young daughter, she's just 2, but she's kind of the same. She always tests the boundaries. She's always doing kind of physically risky stuff. And
she's always kind of egging you on to see if you're going to get, you know, upset by what she does.
Exactly. You know, there's a little bit of a twinkle in the eye. Just, okay, she's always socially kind of, you know, programming and seeing what's going there. So, yeah.
My 6-year-old is like that. He's very, very active. And yeah, it's interesting as a parent to try and figure out how to navigate that while, yeah, wanting to keep their spirits untamed, right? Like we don't want to tame them.
Exactly. I mean, that's the beauty of it, right? Yeah.
How do we channel that positively? Mm-hmm. So you've written a book, and I think, I mean, the first time we had spoken, you shared with me about the book you had written around entrepreneurialism and the startup ecosystem in Japan, and that you had been curious and I guess interviewed a whole variety of startup founders. What led to that project here when you were deciding just out of the blue to do this research and then turn it into a book to share?
I think it was, you know, like entrepreneurialism or kind of creating thing, it's just this like tightness of energy for me. It's like got to be released, right? And I think there was just so much pent up energy in that, I had to write that book. And kind of the reason was it was like failure, up until that point. So we had started Wahl and Case, a recruitment firm in Japan, and the idea was to innovate globally and kind of do that. And we were quickly pretty successful. We were a profitable type of thing. So we started to try quite a bit of innovations, and we were doing like different tech companies. I think we launched 5 kind of projects, whether they were full companies or not. And they all failed. Some failed quickly, some failed very painfully. It was expensive, it was emotional. And basically, we were kind of doing this. We were doing tech recruitment. So we were seeing what kind of startups and things were trending in Silicon Valley at the time. This was 11 years ago when we first founded the firm, and there wasn't this startup culture at the time. So there wasn't a lot of resources. So much has changed. It's amazing, and this is how fast things change and how fast things normalize in Japan is incredible. But like entrepreneurialism was still weird. There was really no resources for it. But I was meeting a lot of kind of elite Japanese at the time. And, from McKinsey or Goldman Sachs or Todai or whatever. And they're like, oh, you became an entrepreneur. I'm so impressed. This is so amazing. I wish I could have the courage to do that. So we were kind of putting all these pieces together. So, okay, we have some excess capital. We know how to hire people. And we can, we have this entrepreneurialism bent. We see this talent that want to become entrepreneurs. And we see, tech that's trending. And at the time, there was this idea arbitrage, and it was like 7 or 8 months before, something in Silicon Valley got set up, in Japan. So we put it all together and launched like 5 projects and 5 kind of companies. So we'd recruit in the CEO, put in some seed money, try to kind of build things up, and they all failed. And it was—
You had top talent, you had money investment, but the secret sauce was missing. Something was—
Well, I think it wasn't their idea, right? And it wasn't their kind of entrepreneurialism. So, and there were we didn't have enough capital to kind of go through like the different stages of growth. So, we could get like early product market fit, but when you try to put them on this ladder of VC and, again, VC, there weren't that many VC, they weren't very risk taking. They were kind of like more corporate salaryman VC at the time. Like they're like, oh, who's these people that own some shares that help you set it up? And we don't trust them. We don't know who they are. So nobody would kind of follow on and invest as well. So it was difficult. And like basically, over 2.5 years, kind of learned how to build a tech company. We had engineers or kind of how to build like a tech service, what goes well, what doesn't go well in Japan. And I felt that story had to be told. And like, I really need to tell, like, this was really, really painful, And so the idea to do it, okay, coming from recruitment, interviewing people and, who wants to read about Casey Wahl's story after he's been an entrepreneur for 2 or 3 years, like that's not interesting, but, Japanese like to read about themselves through a foreigner's eye. Like there's a whole kind of group. So I'm like, okay.
Like a subgenre.
Exactly. Right. So, okay, let's interview Japanese founders at the time and get them to talk really about the pain. And of course, because I had experienced it, I knew really kind of what the different pains are. I could ask questions.
And what questions to ask.
And there wasn't any book like it at the time, like that really kind of made entrepreneurialism human, right? It was always these hero stories like, okay, the founder of this company, he was so smart and he had this wonderful
the unicorn stories.
Yeah, exactly.
It's always kind of the same trope of, the brilliant genius who starts in a garage in Silicon Valley and
it's a little bit too manufactured and it doesn't feel human, right?
Well, and it doesn't diversify the models of entrepreneurialism that we really need to have on the market so that we're really inspiring all types of people, not just the computer science brilliant nerd who, wants to sit in the parents' garage with 2 friends and build the next whatever it is. I think certainly as a woman, I've never found those stories inspiring very much. It's not accessible to the backgrounds that I've come through on law and political science, for one. And it sort of creates this stereotype that unless you're in tech or in coding or in some kind of area of engineering or computer science, that is, that's not a part of, you're probably not destined to be in the tech space. And so then you don't see yourself in that space, and you don't see yourself as having a potential pathway of building something that's tech related. And I think this is something that through our conversations, I really learned from you on at what point did, I think I asked you, because I was having this sort of existential, crisis of, well, is Enjoy going to be predominantly a consulting firm? Or are we going to be doing something different than that, that is broader and that maybe has a little bit more breadth and impact? And I was thinking about, when did you redefine Wahl and Case from being in the recruitment and consulting space to being a tech company? And I think I asked you that question, and it really helped me think about, okay, how would I pivot Enjoy to then maybe identify first and foremost as a tech company, and secondarily with the consulting supporting the build out after, but that the tech piece is first. And then how does that change my relationship to tech as someone coming out of law and political science and not at all in the, technical skills, engineering, coding. Do you want to maybe share a little bit about how the Wahl and Case journey and how you've built out that tech identity and how you pivoted to be a tech firm?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it was long, and again, it's just failure. So the idea, when I started Wahl and Case, the vision was to be global and innovate recruitment at a global kind of capacity.
What was wrong with recruitment at the time that you felt you wanted to change it?
It's still so broken, right? I mean, if you ask people like the NPS, the Net Promoter Score, for candidates and clients, they've all had bad experiences, right? So almost every candidate and client that's worked with a recruiter, probably they've had a bad experience. Whether it's not understanding them as an individual, misrepresenting information, not doing proper follow-up, and kind of, recruitment, when people are changing jobs, it's one of the most stressful, kind of high anxiety times in their life, right? And, so I'm changing my identity. I'm going to a whole environment, a new environment, a new boss, and this is going to be
coming under scrutiny by all of these new actors who are looking at your CV and, are you talented and are you qualified and do we want you, or do we, the rejection, right, that you go through when you're on the market is
exactly. And it's even the interview process is a different skill set. Being good at your job and interviewing are totally different, right? So there's some really good interviews that aren't great at their job, and kind of vice versa. So it's super stressful. And I think both sides, on the client that's hiring, they don't have a lot of visibility about, okay, who are the candidates available? If you think of your typical hiring manager, they only get to hire once every 2 years or so. And they want that, awesome kind of unicorn, and they want champagne for beer money. And okay, those are the wrong expectations, and they have to kind of be educated by the market, and people aren't going to be, 120% qualified and then work for your 80% pay and your 80, So they've got to go through that kind of learning curve and that emotional curve, and same on, kind of the individual side. So I think from both sides, there's so much time that's just wasted. There's not enough, information on, people are kind of going blind on these big life decisions. I think the decision making is very broken, about how people go about making decisions, and kind of what we're talking about, diversity and inclusion, what you were saying about kind of entrepreneurs, and they have this pattern that they know, but that's not.
And they kind of hire. I mean, certainly what I've seen in the last 2 years of just looking at every research results I can find on hiring processes and from a D&I perspective, and how ironically what I keep finding is that it corroborates the last 25 years of what I've been looking at recruitment into political parties, where the people recruiting are recruiting people like them, and they're recruiting the usual suspects who look like them and who talk like them and who come from their same, Todai or whatever, KO or, Ivy League backgrounds. Predominantly men recruiting men. And so if you don't have any kind of a process to diversify recruitment process, the recruiters or the gatekeepers for political parties, or be it the recruiters who are the gatekeepers for companies, they're not diversifying the talent pool, because they themselves have all these blind spots on thinking that excellence is this one monolithic image, and it happens to look a lot like themselves, right? It's just ironic how that sort of we need to move outside that box and say, okay, social affinity biases play out in a really interesting way, but we need to then say, okay, well, how do we build out processes that check all of those blind spots we have, and not just through a one-off unconscious bias training workshop, but, memorizing the 30 unconscious biases are not going to make us have a better process if it's not really built into the DNA of the process itself to say at what levels are the blind spots and the biases going to manifest, and then how are we checking that and mitigating that at every single stage, right? And you don't really see that happening, and that's assuming that the data, the AI-driven data, checking the CVs and scanning, like pre-screening all the CVs, aren't weeding out. They've already weeded out so many candidates through the AI systems sometimes, because you're not showing up with the undergraduate degree in computer science, or you're not showing up with full bilingualism in English and Japanese for the Japanese market. Even if the job doesn't require Japanese language skills, sometimes that filter is turned on. And so there's just a funnel that just reduces down to who the actual hiring, manager even gets to see and consider is so narrowed superficially. And I wonder, what is your experience? You've built a really interesting service that you can maybe speak to about how you're combining, I think you say, I'm going to find it. I know I wrote it down for EQ-IQ. So maybe you can also, that's a good segue to talk about what was the Wahl and Case journey, and then how you pivoted towards the EQ-IQ journey of being a CEO of EQ-IQ as a larger entity that's sort of building a broader, I guess, base and infrastructure of these services. But the EQ-IQ, I love the motto that you say, you balance the EQ of consulting with the IQ of technological innovation.
You delivered that so fantastic. Thank you.
How do you protect right? This is such a big piece around AI and big data being fraught also because programmed by imperfect human beings who build their biases right into the way the AI machine codes and then scans for CVs, and how do you mitigate it? I mean, how do you deal with that for your process?
I think what you've just talked about, like, this is what I find fascinating. And humans, we need to work, we need to have industry, we're an industritive, kind of species, right? And if we don't, like, there's going to be a lot more war and all these kind of negative things. So, and how do you hire? But like, we're talking about kind of hiring and all the problems involved, and it is, bias is so easy. And I think to hire properly, you almost have to unlearn to be human, right? It's, okay, I want to hire somebody great and I need to trust them, right? It's that trust component is there, and there's lots of studies on trust. Okay, it's easier to build trust with somebody who has 5 commonalities with you, right? Like 5 kind of things. And some external ones are very easy, right? So people kind of get into these patterns, and like when, a company is busy and they have a lot of stress and they've never been trained properly, so they're going to easily kind of fall into those type of patterns, right? I think larger companies where this becomes an issue and they have kind of the resources and they can kind of unteach some of these biases and kind of show the trust and the output, having more diversity and kind of more inclusion. It's incredibly difficult. And this is what we want to solve. And this is what I wanted to solve with the company is, when I love recruitment to death. When I was coming through it, like, I had a ton of bosses that said, hey, it's not rocket science, but it's beyond rocket science. I really think, we've got how many billions of neurons in our brains, and how many connections between all of those, like all of the endpoints and the way we go to decisions is so different.
And emotions.
Right, and emotions.
Factoring it on top of, and the adrenaline and the immune system and the, the nervous system, all interrupting. Right,
you go in, you meet a charismatic manager, oh, that was really exciting, that was stimulating conversation, I would join the company, but it's a horrible work environment. Perfectly kind of normal case type of thing. So you're making, a bad decision with bad input. So, whether we're making bad decisions with bad inputs, because of our own biases, or we're over relying on our friends' information or our family's information, or does that come down to data type of thing, or what are the data inputs? Right. It's very complex. And, this is what we want to do with EQ-IQ, right? So there's a humanity side. We don't forget about being human. We don't forget that, hey, emotion is a part of how we make decisions. Emotion is a part of, having satisfactory lives. It's a big part of who we are. It can't be all data. And this is, where I get frustrated with tech companies. It's all data all the time. And it goes back to, all right, AI is going to
data doesn't give us wisdom, right? It just does not. It's like, for me as a political scientist from, social science background of 25 years, it's frustrating that the natural sciences, in the olden days, in the good old, like going back to Aristotle, we did not break down knowledge systems into natural science and social science. We just had sciences and knowledge and wisdom, and political philosophy was as core to understanding the world, and that the world isn't flat, right? political philosophy was as essential to exploring with observation and, actually using scientific testing of the real world. Those were integrated. And I feel that superficial division of how we break things down, there's this idea that data equals wisdom, but data requires critical thinking skills and high level analysis to, to really weed out the noise of data that isn't really helpful evidence. And what is the actual core data that gives us evidence-based decision-making that is generating wisdom and wise practices, right?
I think that
is
so wise and so true, yeah.
But sometimes I feel like the big data, we need to have big labs and big data and quantitative this, that, and the other, as if you could bypass humanity and wisdom and ethics and political philosophy. And why are we doing this? Like, ultimately, why are we doing this? And if it's not about, in principle, every company says they're doing it because they want to contribute something good for human well-being. But then why would you bypass the human in the whole processes of the data collection or of the data processes? So it is a bit mind-boggling.
Those are my current pet peeves. And, I think I could go on rants on that, like especially in startups and tech, like there's an overemphasis on STEM, going back.
Yes.
Where entering it is like, okay, if you don't come from a STEM background type of thing, and how important STEM is, and STEM should rule the world, and STEM should be in kind of the education, but we are human. Storytelling is critical to humanity, and if you want to do anything, like, why aren't we taught more storytelling in school? Why aren't we bringing this? So this is where data cannot, sometimes it can help us, but it doesn't give us storytelling skills. Communication. Our happiness comes from communication and mutual understanding, right? Where are we learning this? Is that built into tech products? 99% of them, no, absolutely not. So,
and building trust within community, yeah.
Exactly. So, I think a lot of, the tech and, the current trajectory is this STEM, is this data and bigger systems. And, that why are we doing it? Okay, we're making life a little bit more optimized. We're making it more efficient so we can be productive. But is that what we want to be as humans? No, we don't want to, right?
To be a robot who is efficient.
I don't need data to monitor everything. Like, I should in touch, if my body is off, I don't need a watch telling me, like, I should be able to be in touch with feeling, that type of thing. So,
I'm tired.
This is where I think, people like yourself and we need more people kind of from the humanities to bring that into the tech. And I think this should be the next wave or the next 10 to 15 years. And the nice thing is it's getting easier to start up, right? You can buy the different components. Like, AI is pretty much going to be a commodity in the next several years, right? You can buy different components and plug it into your system. And of course, if you have a humanity background, you have kind of more an ethical kind of training. Okay, what data are we putting into this? And over time, people do want to buy a human system, and that makes them feel better, not just only efficient too.
Well, I think you can trust it. I mean, there's reasons why I think we will never completely automate so many jobs. I mean, I know that it's core to the Japanese industry to think that robots will solve, caregiving and a whole bunch of other things. But there's a point at which, in some areas, I'm not sure we want to have a robot caregiving us when we're, at a certain point of vulnerability in our life, or wanting to be caregived by someone who has warm emotions, where we would feel that sense of trust and connection. And so we have to think through what are the ethical implications of when we're going to farm out, and what can you really farm out and outsource to being automated, and what still requires high level critical thinking and human judgment on the ethical front. Because things can go wrong very quickly if we don't sort of bring in those checks and balances. We even have a hard time doing that in our human process and our people processes as human beings. So why do we think we can do it better with robots is beyond me. I know that in, for example, Canada, in the last, I would say 10 to 15 years, there's been sort of a push to say we talk about STEAM, and it's STEM plus the A for arts, to try and sort of regain the balance that it can't just always be this absence of art and philosophy and music. And of course, we know the research shows that people who do really, really well in languages and in music generally do well in math, because this is just all code or language, right? And so when we think about, and you see people who are highly trained in music and they actually do quite well in the math sides of things, they also speak 3 languages or 4 languages, they have, access to understanding different codes of interaction and behavior through the different language communities that they have now culturally acclimatized to be able to speak those languages at a high level. Those are skills that we are forgetting is part of coding. It's part of math, it's a part of logic, and it's a part of how we think through connection and community. I mean, I don't, for myself and for you, I imagine what you would say and how you would say it in Japanese and the cultural norms around connection and community and shinrai kanke, right? Like how like relations of trust plays out in how you speak the Japanese language is quite different from how you speak trust or linguistically perform trust in English. And all of that's code, right? But it's very highly sophisticated coding through the language and the culture together, all immersed. And I guess I would love to hear you speak a bit more about intrinsic motivation, because I think this concept is really exciting to me. I mean, I've done and have been building out more of an interest in the last, I mean, really it started with my own mother, frankly, in the last, raising me. She was always talking about, positive psychology and like emotional intelligence and how do you build your communication skills and how do you build, and she was very enthused about those topics and was an entrepreneur herself. So the irony that here I had this role model of a mom who was an entrepreneur her whole life, but I had never seen myself in that role as an entrepreneur until very late in the game, right? But so how does that knowledge around emotional intelligence and psychology, because I know that's deeply embedded into the concept of intrinsic motivation that you use within the attuned software as a service and consulting. Can you talk more about this concept? Because I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I'm still excited about the last one. So like STEAM, that's the first time I've ever heard that.
Okay.
I really wish, Canada could have a larger voice. I'm sure that trying.
Oh my God, you and me both.
Like it's too much dominated by Silicon Valley, and I think it's very myopic, right? But like STEAM is fantastic, and I think I really wish whatever I can do to help. But please, you're doing something great with this. Like I think that needs to be said more and more people to understand that. And like just about like Japanese and trust, and kind of the robot commentary is. Certainly Japan has this leading edge in robotics, and a lot of things will be automated. But like the Japanese business ecosystem is driven by relationships, right? It's very relationship driven. It's not efficient. There's still fax machine. There's still horrible forms you have to fill out, right? But it's relationship driven. And I think this thought, and this is why, I'm quite excited about now Japan's getting its digital ministry, coming in next year type of thing. It's like
really
that.
Exciting.
But I think they will have critical thinking about, okay, what is the human aspect of this? How do we keep this Japanese identity and relationship? And, you were talking about trust, and trust is critical for kind of us as humans to be satisfied and to accomplish anything. But in Japanese, there's more words of trust than there are in English. Like trust is broken down to kind of different things. And, one of the like interesting insights that I've seen in, at least for my work is when it comes to work, there can be shinyo. You can trust somebody to complete their task, or you can trust somebody's competence. And then there's shinrai. You trust them as a human, like a deeper form of trust, right?
More ethical.
Right? So what they say, even if it's kind of negative, you get this higher level of psychological safety. But if you have that shinrai, okay, you can get more negative feedback. You can have better discussion. You can have more innovation type of thing. But so much trust is just shinyo. It's transactional. Okay, I can get it to complete the task, but then you don't have that. So I think that concept needs to be spoken about a lot more within organizations and move just from shinyo to shinrai, like really trusting them as a human being. So on to intrinsic motivation. Yeah. So like going back to helping people make better, decisions when it comes to, hiring and retention.
To have shinrai kanke, right? Whether they think they can see the possibility of relations of trust or deep trust, shinrai kanke, in their new employer context, right? You're kind of helping them gauge that?
Exactly. So like up until Attune came out, like how do you know somebody's intrinsic motivations? It's really hard to do that. I've interviewed thousands and thousands of people, and I'd ask people, okay, what are you motivated by? Do we even have a common language? Do they have the self-awareness? Maybe they're quite complex and they have multiple motivations. So this was kind of the inspiration to do it, because, that motivational alignment with somebody entering a new organization and what that manager can provide, how they communicate, and basically like the research heart of it is, intrinsic motivation is connected to somebody's value systems. So it's connected to their values towards work. So what you value equals what you're going to prioritize, the goals that you're going to set. And these connect to your intrinsic motivations, which is more sustainable than extrinsic motivation, right? And, I think most managers have been trained, and, most organizations have been set up for like, okay, incentives and more extrinsic motivations type of thing.
Can you give me an example, maybe, or a couple of examples of what is the difference? Maybe you can define for those of us who are less familiar, what would constitute intrinsic motivation examples versus what would be examples of extrinsic motivation?
Extrinsic will be more incentive based, okay, here's a reward. Okay, so we're going to have a competition for this week, okay, who can make the most number of phone calls, for example.
So the competition element, someone is attracted by that.
That could be that, or it could be, like, here's like a prize or a shout out or something like that. So those can be kind of, and with extrinsic, so it's basically in the wording, like it's something coming from the outside to try to motivate you, right? So you have an external force doing that, so it's the carrot and the stick is kind of more the traditional kind of way of looking at it, but it's quite short term, like it doesn't last. There's lots and lots of research that it's not sustainable, and it ruins creativity, basically. So there's quite a lot of research for that. And then intrinsic motivation this is where it's coming from inside. Again, going back to my story about why I wanted to write the book, like writing a book, I hated it. It was painful. Like
I hear you.
It was
it's horrible.
It's horrible. So, you don't want to write it. Like a lot of people go in with an extrinsic motivation. Okay, I want to be on the bestseller list. I want to get, extra passive income.
I just want to get it done.
Exactly. And, you have to write that book, right? And so it's intrinsic motivation. So that's something driving you from the inside that's more sustainable, right? And you'll overcome a lot more difficulties and, more obstacles. If it's raining, if it's cold, you're going to go to work. You're going to go to work more excitable, and it's a lot more sustainable type of thing.
Is it connected to kind of passion? Not passion, but like it's internal values?
It's internal values. So again, like, okay, what is the priorities for you, and what are your values for work? And your value systems were mostly set, when we're in our formative years. So when we're kids, when we're teenagers, kind of our early adulthood. And values are a learned thing. So we learn our values from our environment. We learn it from our parents. We learn it from our schools. We learn it from our communities. So values can change over time, but they're the lowest level of our kind of psychological makeup, right? They're the deepest thing. There's no way for us to visually see them until kind of a tune came along. So, going back to the decision making, now that we can see each other's values towards work. And
attuned measures.
And you have this report, it comes out, it shows very clearly. So, okay, here's Jackie's values. Here's Casey's values. Here are my intrinsic motivations. And then we can map out the team. We can map out the gaps between individuals. And kind of what I really love about it is we can see the motivational gaps because, as you get larger and larger people, of course, you're not going to have the same motivations, right? And what we found is intrinsic motivations are like a fingerprint. They're very unique. There's 1.7 million different combinations. And this is why kind of managing people and managing people not like you is very, very difficult. Like, how do you understand them? But now, like, just graphically, we can see, okay, here's somebody different than Casey. And I can see where our value gaps are. And there's explanations, and it no longer becomes emotional, right? Where
it's just a different facet of diversity that enriches the team if you harness it right.
Exactly. And the first part is understanding. Like if I can just understand that they are different and we have a shared common language and we can communicate a little bit, then we should be able to work together and build trust. But unless that, okay, it can become very emotional if we have different values, right? Like if somebody has a different personality, say, oh, that's his personality. Okay, he overreacts, whatever it might be, type of thing like that. But if somebody's values, like, I just don't understand those values, it's very, very difficult to understand people's and react positively without. So we bring it more kind of objective ways. So it can deepen communication, can deepen trust, and adds to that diversity and inclusion. And because it's kind of the intrinsic motivation, it creates room for more, creativity and more innovation.
I imagine that, and perhaps correct me if I'm wrong, particularly for managers to have feedback. I know there's different SWOT analysis that you can do on the strengths and weaknesses of your team and sort of map out those things too, but that's more maybe skills based. And what you're talking about is a much deeper inner sort of drive. For example, if I know that this person on my team really would like public recognition for their role, and that for them, that's going to just make them feel seen and make them feel good about their work. That's their intrinsic, maybe motivating need that drives them to do a great job. Maybe another person on the team, it's something different. It's about, I'm not sure, you can guide me on what would be the others, but it helps maybe a manager then know how to meet the emotional, not completely the emotional needs, but to predict
they are emotional as well. Yeah, that's
right. In some ways, it's
because if
knowing
you're
how to give
misunderstood,
them.
like if your manager doesn't understand you as a human being, you're not happy, right? You get negative emotions from that.
Well, you're not seen.
Exactly. And this helps you be seen. So like, I don't have high status needs. Like my status needs to be publicly seen, be publicly visible, right? And I've managed people with very high needs for that. And before it too, like I'm like, oh, they're just being narcissistic again. When I get into my negative kind of,
being a prima donna,
catty, like yeah, why, I've done other stuff. I'm not always asking for recognition. Like I get into my catty negative humanity, which is part of me. Like without that objectivity, without that understanding, without that ability to see, then I can have a negative lens towards somebody like that as a manager because I have different needs. And vice versa, I have very high rationality needs. I love debating. I love kind of intellectually sparring.
This is where we enjoy the conversation too.
Right? So it comes very naturally. So, but, there's members on the team like, they hate
don't want to be pushed.
Like when I ask that third why, they're like, no, please, no. Like,
just let it go.
I'm a manager. I'm whatever. Like I have the status. Why don't you just trust my opinion? I'm like, no, I just
follow my.
It's not about you. It's about the idea. And I'm like, why can't you understand that? Like, and I've been in places like that.
Seeking truth here, right? Truth seeking, right?
Patience isn't necessarily one of my highest virtues, so this helps me be more patient, as a person.
Definitely. Well, I certainly have found what limited experience I've had with it very, very exciting to read about. And in your most recent article, I think you put out on LinkedIn, which I found really interesting too, and how it mapped out, and you talk about that in that article. So I am excited to continue to learn about how this is something that we can use not only in companies, but I'm even just thinking, I'm serving on a board of a women's organization, FEW Japan, of course, that you are actually, Wahl and Case is supporting as an organizational member. So thank you for that. But I often think, what are the benefits even for the nonprofit sector to be thinking about how they would use Attuned? Because, working in the nonprofit sector, often it's, volunteerism, right? And so if I even just think to the volunteer boards I served on in Canada 20 years ago, that team building space, there's probably a lot of overlap on people coming around a sense of, being mission focused, like wanting to support women's empowerment or wanting to support, refugees or wanting to support, reducing child poverty. There are these commonalities of the values that are bringing those volunteers to the table to work in the nonprofit sector to move the dial on those organizations and have change agency and social impact. But it's not like a CSR initiative. It's not their professional jobs. This is their volunteer role, right? As a citizen or a civic duty, or maybe it's their upbringing. I don't know. My parents did a lot of civic volunteering out of Christian upbringing in small town Canada, right? But I think even for the nonprofit sector then, to understand, even within everyone having that maybe altruism motivator out of volunteering, wanting to volunteer and give their time, there might be other things they're also wanting to get out of that experience that then I think they could find out about themselves would be interesting too. So for a lot of different organizations, right, this is a really interesting way to build the team.
Yeah, I think anywhere where there's two humans in the room, like or two humans connecting, it can kind of be quite helpful. So, and like if you probably think of your own kind of nonprofit experience, I'm sure there were unproductive conversations and unproductive times. And it's because people are coming together quite often with different motivations and they have a different kind of core driver for that, and you can't get alignment. And I think this can help get alignment, right?
True.
And create higher levels of psychological safety, so you should be able to achieve more as a group. But yeah, like konkatsu, like is still a thing in Japan, right? And there's been ideas, hey, why can't Attune?
Yeah, promoting marriage matching. Oh my goodness, are you kidding? That's absolutely, I can imagine.
We've been had ideas like, hey, okay, when husbands and wives fight, like, Well, they're fighting typically because of values. And if you have big gaps in
They
value
are.
sets type of things,
And
at least this can bring.
absolutely. And I mean, in terms of like how life partnering plays out, like what are your aspirations for a life partner? Like, are you looking for a traditional division of gender roles in the family, you know, patriarchal, old school, like, you know, version of like the 1950s, you know, household, or are you looking for life partnering that's more holistic and there's this individual respect and playing to your strengths? And yeah, if absolutely, you could get that information right off the get-go. I think
Right?
would be,
no,
I think a lot of women would be like, whoa, dodged a bullet. and maybe men too. If, you know, maybe some men are looking for more outside the box partners, but you know, maybe they're not finding women who code as outside the box. It'd be interesting to see on a dating app how much individuals would reveal their real selves.
I think it's a bigger population after, you know, I think it'd be quite large, right? Especially
Right?
if it's
To
like
say-
that konkatsu level, like, okay, this is going to be a life partner, you know, but
Yeah, for sure. You'd want to really have some serious information on what's
you
the
know,
match and what's the
self-awareness is pretty big. And, you know, people ultimately just want to be happy, right? So you have to kind of, if I reveal this, the tendency is, okay, I'll attract somebody, you know, more aligned and I can be happier.
Yeah, I highly recommend that people go into marriage or just life partnering. Even if we don't even worry about the legal iterations of that, just go into life partnering with a little bit more evidence-based approach. Because I've been in different relationships and had failures and been there, done that, right? And it's like the job.
It's
job
exactly
hunt.
the same,
It's a
right?
huge identity shift, right? It's like, oh, okay, I thought that this was going to be the lifelong, relationship,
Right,
and
and
then
you
10
know, you go
years
through all the
in, now
emotional
it's like, oh
problems
my,
as well. Yeah, like,
You
am
know,
I good
yeah.
enough? Am I a bad person? Type of thing. You know, am I just negative? Should I be more patient? Whatever it might be, right? And
yeah.
I think it's
And
the
maybe
same
if it's value
dynamics.
alignment, it's like you're investing in vain because there's just not a good fit on the intrinsic motivations of how to life partner with one another. So that's an excellent, interesting area you can innovate in Japan. Absolutely.
Someday.
On that note, I'm going to ask you to give us a last sort of your hopes. I mean, you've done a lot of work supporting women in the entrepreneurial space, women's startups. You featured them in that book. You obviously wrote the script for the movie, Startup
Right there,
Girls.
right? There we go.
The Japanese movie Startup Girls, which was so interesting. Obviously, you're a supporter of Few Japan, which we're grateful for. But putting aside those pieces, for your role as a leader in Japan, and I certainly see you as an inclusive leader in Japan, and that's why I'm so happy to have you in the Thought Partner Network, inspiring me and helping me learn. What is your hopes either for your industry or for Japan or for the world? The sky's the limit. You can decide what scope you want to talk about, and what would be your, where do you want to see things move the dial in the next 5 to 10 years? What do you want to see change?
I would probably just put it as a lifetime, right? You know, like I want to solve this goal. Like if we look from a very work perspective, like, how do we make it better and more inclusive and have kind of more diversity and just basically more understanding and more trust and more psychological safety in our work environments and making those kind of big decisions. And that's kind of my goal professionally, right? And that's a problem for a lifetime. I think kind of as running an organization, as a founder, it's like social justice. I've got a couple of those bones in my body, right? And, I think a key part of it is the distribution of happiness. And like, you don't want, big aligned, just a few people very happy and, some okay and a lot unhappy, right? So, and when it comes to kind of diversity and inclusion, it's really a discussion about power. So I have a little bit of power, right? So we have some economic power, we have some organizational power, and, can we use those to help, that social justice cause, make it more kind of inclusive, increase kind of, the happiness level and help people that might not have had those opportunities, where systematically they've been overlooked or they don't get the chances. Well, yeah, we can take those chances. We can embed that into the organization. So I think as an organization, just want to build that and do as much as we can. So like those processes are there, like, you know, that mentality and that thought process there. I think there's a lot of things kind of to overlook, but, you know, I guess I'm from, you know, let me just change my world. Let me be nice to my kids. Let me be nice to my wife. Let me be nice to my friends, you know, to the people I meet at work every day. And, you know, if I can make one person's life happier, they can probably make another, right? You know, and what I'd love to see is, you know, now that we've had Corona, everybody knows the, you know, the R0, the replication rate of Corona, right? But there is a replication rate of happiness. There is a replication rate, you know, of anger. Do you know what they are? No, most people don't know what the replication, you know, rate of happiness is, but it's higher than Corona. So if you go out and, you know, you make somebody else happier, they'll go out and make 2.2 more people more happier as well, right? So that's what I can go do, and I'll try to do it as much as I can. Of course, there's days when I'm angry, and I'll try to keep that replication rate low, but, you know.
Go off to the bathroom and scream in a pillow.
So, you know, it's just being human, right? You know, and I want to do more of that and help, I guess, more people. I guess if people could understand what is the replication rate of human, you know, of happiness, and everybody knew that, I think we'd have a happier.
And their personal power in that.
Exactly.
How personally, individually powerful we actually are in that particular piece. And so the change agency really can begin from that position, that power of one. Absolutely, absolutely. Well, that's a fabulous lesson and takeaway for our audience today, and for me as well. So thank you very much for such an exciting and dynamic discussion. I always learn so much and enjoy speaking with you every time we meet. This is the first time we've done this digitally, though. I was realizing the last conversations were always really long coffee days in Tokyo, but I look forward to that day as well when we can get back to some of that normal. So thank you, Casey, for sharing all of these thoughts and lessons today. And we, of course, go live in principle every Tuesday at noon in Japan, but I will issue one caveat because next week is the Emperor's birthday. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's a national holiday, yes, on Tuesday. So we're going to be doing our live stream on Wednesday, the 24th at noon. And I'm not sure if people have clued in already or started putting this on their radar, but we are coming up to the 10th anniversary of the East Japan earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear meltdown. March 11th, of course, can't believe it's been 10 years. So we will be doing a special live stream commemorative series. I've had the pleasure of doing what we call participatory action research for the last 5 years, where I would go into communities and I would follow young women leaders in post-disaster Tohoku and learn about their leadership, what they were pursuing, what the roadblocks they were experiencing in local rural communities in Tohoku, and then how they were navigating and overcoming those challenges to bring their visions and their ideas for their communities forward. And so we're going to kick off next week. It'll be our first live stream, actually held in Japanese, and we will feature Mizuho Sugeno. And she will be joining us from Namie in Fukushima. And she's originally from Nippon Matsu, which actually was one of the hearts of organic farming in Japan. And she will be sharing all of her insights about organic farming practices in Japan, how the post-disaster context led to using the skills of basically organic farming to restore and bring back the soil, because of course they had to restore the soils from all the nuclear damage, the cesium and whatnot, and the different techniques to do that, to be able to restore the soils, to be able to re-engage in safe farming practices in Fukushima. So a world of experience that we will learn about from a young woman leader who really has given me so much inspiration, and I've learned so much already from the last 5 years of following her journey. So tune into that if you are able next Wednesday at noon. And I will just issue a quick reminder that, of course, Enjoy Diversity and Innovation is here to offer a multidisciplinary team. We have professionals capable of supporting on D&I for companies, for education for leaders, and we would love to work with you. So give us a shout. You can find us at www.en-joi.com. We want it to be enjoyable and fun, even if it's disruptive and we unlearn things, right, that make us uncomfortable, and then we relearn how to have fun with diversity. And just a general shout out to the Enjoy team, who I am forever grateful for their support in helping all of these bits and bobs and parts of the live stream come together each week, and for all of their deep support. I will close with our credits, sharing the information about all the different actors with Enjoy who've helped. And I would invite you to enjoy a wonderful song called Evergreen, sung by Canadian singer-songwriter Andrea Menard. I hope you can take a 2 to 3 minute pause and enjoy the song, and then go back to your work days. So thank you for joining today. Thank you so much, Casey.
Exactly, it was a lot of fun.
This has been so fun. Thank you so much. And I will share screen and get this loading. Thanks, everyone.
The window in my parlor shines on my favorite chair. I sit and watch the season turn as white as my hair. So many years older, a frosty pallor has touched my skin, but I am a sapling inside a giant evergreen. Wonder and doubt, but I've softened at the edges, my laugh line spread out.